On 16 March 1968, around 100 U.S. Army troops entered the My Lai Village area in South Vietnam. They were part of a force that was conducting a major clearance operation against North Vietnamese guerrillas, who were also known as the Viet Cong. My Lai Village is unofficially called Pinkville, a designation that refers to the village's pink markings on U.S. military maps. Quảng Ngãi Province, where My Lai Village is located, was actually already in a state of ruin due to frequent bombing and shelling by the American Army. The situation was so bad that by 1968, almost all the houses in the entire province had been destroyed or damaged. During the clearance of Vietnamese Communist forces, the Americans emphasized the body count as a measure of success rather than territory captured. However, because the Viet Cong were renowned for their guerrilla tactics and often mixed with the civilian population, American soldiers had difficulty identifying and separating combatants from non-combatants. In addition to mixing with civilians, the insurgents were sometimes sheltered and protected by civilians, making the situation even more complex and dangerous. This left American troops not only fighting against an invisible enemy, but also against the widespread fear of surprise attacks. The inability to pursue an enemy that always escaped added to the frustration of the American Army due to the role of civilians who seemed to support the Viet Cong. Coupled with pressure from superiors to kill as many Viet Cong soldiers as possible, there was a sense of anger and resentment towards civilians. This would lead to the gap between the number of bodies reported and the number of weapons captured, which indicated that many of those killed were not actual combatants. During the famous Tet Offensive, the 48th Viet Cong Battalion launched a series of attacks in the Quảng Ngãi region. U.S. military intelligence later gathered important information and concluded that after the attack, the 48th Viet Cong Battalion retreated and took refuge in a small village called Sun Mai. Inside this village, there were several villages known as My Lai, which were suspected to be the hiding places of the battalion members. The U.S. forces decided to plan a major offensive against the villages of My Lai. This plan involved a company-level unit, which was C Company. C Company was advised by the U.S. military command that the truly civilian residents of My Lai would leave their homes to go to the market at 7 a.m. They concluded that everyone who stayed at home must be Viet Cong or its active sympathizers. Therefore, they were ordered to destroy the village. At the briefing, Captain Ernest Medina was asked about how the order included killing women and children. However, those who attended the briefing gave different answers about Medina's response. On the morning of 16 March at 7:30, the U.S. forces that arrived in the village didn't find a single insurgent. Instead of the expected enemy, the GI found women, children, and the elderly, with most of them cooking breakfast over an outdoor campfire. The GIs were then ordered to gather hundreds of residents in a small field. The population of children, women, toddlers, and the elderly were then asked if any of them knew about the Viet Cong and if they were hiding it. However, none of the residents answered and pointed out the existence of Viet Cong members. At this point, Lieutenant Calais ordered his men to take action. Hundreds of civilians were killed by shooting, and women were tortured or raped. Dozens of villagers were also headed into a pit and shot at with automatic weapons. After American troops had slaughtered hundreds of civilians, they also shot livestock so that they would no longer provide support to the enemy. In the aftermath of the horrific incident, recognition of the number of casualties remains a question mark. The exact number of casualties varies from source to source. The most commonly cited are 347 and 504 victims. A memorial at the site of the massacre lists 504 names, with the ages of the victims ranging from 82 years old at the oldest to 1 year old at the youngest.